Chapter 1. The Lie. He is not taking my son from me. Lilith's voice cracked through the crowded courtroom like a whip. The hall fell silent. Even the elders seated on the raised stone platform looked startled by the desperation in her voice. She barely noticed. Her entire world was standing a few feet away. A little boy with dark curls sat quietly beside an elderly court attendant, clutching a carved wooden horse against his chest. Joan and her son, her heart, her reason for waking up every morning, her reason for surviving. The little boy looked confused by all the shouting. His large silver blue eyes searched for her from across the room. The same eyes he had inherited from her. The sight nearly broke her. Lilith dropped to her knees. The rough stone floor bit into her skin through her simple brown dress. She didn't care. Tears burned her eyes. "He is my son," her voice trembled. "My son." A sneer stretched across the face of the man standing opposite her. Her uncle, Garrick, the man who had not visited her once when her mate died. The man who had not offered help when she struggled through winter. The man who had not bothered checking whether she or Jonan had food. Yet somehow he had appeared the moment inheritance became involved. Strange how that worked. Garrick folded his arms across his expensive dark tunic. The gold embroidery around the sleeves gleamed under the torchlight. He looked more pleased with himself than concerned. "As painful as this may be," he said smoothly, "the boy needs stability." Lilith's hands curled into fists. Stability. The word made her want to scream. Where had stability been when she was left alone with a newborn? And the heart-shattering reality that her own mother would rather travel pack to pack, rather than be a mother to Lilith. Where had stability been when she buried her mate's belongings because there was no body to bury? Where had stability been during the nights she cried herself to sleep while Jonan slept against her chest? Now suddenly he cared about stability. The elder seated in the center sighed heavily. His gray beard nearly reached his chest. "Lady Lilith," the title sounded more like pity than respect. "You know the laws." Her stomach dropped. No, not this, not today," the elder continued. "Your son is the legal heir to the estate left behind by his father." Lilith nodded. Of course he was. Everything his father owned belonged to him. Every acre, every coin, every building, every field, all of it. The elder's eyes softened. But the child is still young. Her heart pounded harder. The room suddenly felt too warm, too small, too dangerous. "According to pack law," another elder spoke, "the estate requires a male guardian." Lilith stared. The words felt like stones being piled on her chest. She already knew the law. Everyone knew the law. She had simply prayed they would see reason, that they would look at Jonan, that they would look at her, that they would realize she had managed alone for nearly 3 years. Instead, the third elder delivered the final blow. "Your uncle has petitioned for guardianship." A smile twitched at Garrick's mouth. Lilith wanted to claw it off. "Once granted," the elder continued, "he will oversee the estate and the child's inheritance until the boy reaches adulthood." Lilith shook her head. "No," nobody answered. "No," the word came out stronger. "No." Her voice echoed through the chamber. Jonan flinched. The sight immediately crushed her anger. She softened, forced herself to breathe, then looked back at the elders. "He doesn't care about Jonan." Her voice was shaking now. "He wants the estate." Silence. The elders exchanged glances. Nobody argued, because everybody knew she was right. The problem was that being right and winning were not the same thing. Garrick sighed dramatically. "As I said before, grief has affected her judgment." Lilith lunged forward. "You liar!" gasps erupted throughout the room. The guards immediately stepped closer. Garrick simply smiled, that smile, that horrible smile. The same smile he wore when he first arrived at her home months ago. The same smile he wore when he suggested selling some of the farmland. The same smile he wore every time he talked about helping himself. The center elder raised a hand. "Enough." The room quieted. Then came the sentence that made Lilith's blood run cold. "Unfortunately, Lady Lilith," he paused. "The court must rule according to law." Everything inside her stopped. The world seemed to tilt. For a moment she couldn't hear anything, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her eyes drifted toward Jonan. The little boy smiled when he saw her looking, actually smiled. completely unaware that strangers were discussing his future. Completely unaware that someone was trying to take him away, a memory slammed into her. A tiny newborn wrapped in blankets, 2 warriors standing outside her door, neither able to meet her eyes, the news. The war, the death, her mate never coming home, her entire future collapsing, while she held a baby that wasn't even 3 days old. She had survived all of that. She had survived every lonely night, every cruel whisper, every struggle, every harvest, every winter. She had survived because of him, because of Jonan. Nobody was taking him, nobody. Something desperate sparked inside her, wild, reckless, terrifying. The kind of decision made by people standing at the edge of a cliff. The elder was still speaking. Unless circumstances change. Lilith blinked. Her heart skipped circumstances, a loophole, a tiny opening, a way out. The answer appeared before she even thought it through, and before common sense could stop her. She stood. I remade it. Silence. Complete silence. Even the torches seemed to stop crackling. The elders froze. Garrick froze. The guards froze. Lilith froze. Because the words had already left her mouth. Oh, moon goddess, what had she done? Her stomach dropped so hard she thought she might faint. Across the room, Garrick frowned. What? Lilith swallowed. Her pulse thundered in her ears. There was still time. She could take it back. Tell them she misspoke. Tell them she was emotional. Tell them? No. If she did that, she would lose Jonan. The thought hardened something inside her. She lifted her chin. I have a mate. The lie sounded stronger this time. More convincing. More dangerous. The center elder narrowed his eyes. A mate? Lilith nodded. Inside she was screaming. Outside she forced herself to remain calm. We've been taking things slowly. One elder blinked. Another leaned forward. Garrick looked as if he'd swallowed poison. Lilith nearly felt bad. Nearly. When exactly were you planning to tell the court this? An elder asked. Lilith's mind raced. Fast. Too fast. Every answer felt wrong. Every answer felt like another trap. Recently. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Recently. What did that even mean? She wanted to disappear. Instead, she kept talking. He didn't want attention. Another lie. The first one wasn't enough, apparently. Now she was building an entire castle on top of it. The elders exchanged looks. One of them cleared his throat. If this is true, hope flickered, tiny, fragile. Then Pack Law would indeed recognize his position as protector of both mother and child. Lilith's heart nearly exploded. Garrick immediately stepped forward. She's lying. His voice echoed sharply. Produce him. The room turned toward her. Lilith stopped breathing. Produce him? Her imaginary mate? Right now? The elder nodded. That is reasonable. Reasonable! Reasonable! Lilith wanted to cry. The elder continued. You've 3 days. 3. Tiny, terrible, impossible. If your mate presents himself before the court and the union is verified, the petition will be dismissed. Hope surged. Then panic immediately followed. Because she didn't have a mate. The elder's gaze hardened. But if he does not appear, the rest went unsaid. It didn't need saying. Everyone knew Jonan, the estate, everything, gone. The hearing ended shortly afterward. Lilith barely remembered leaving. The world blurred around her. Villagers whispered. People stared. Some looked curious. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked amused. She ignored them all. Jonan's little hand slipped into hers as they stepped outside. The afternoon sun warmed the stone streets. The boy looked up at her. Mama? Lilith immediately forced a smile. Yes, sweetheart. Why were you shouting? Her heart cracked. She crouched in front of him. His curls bounced in the breeze. His little wooden horse was tucked safely beneath one arm, because of course it was. He carried that thing everywhere. Lilith brushed a hand through his hair. Because Mama was protecting something important. Jonan considered that seriously, then smiled. Me? Tears instantly stung her eyes. Yes, the little boy grinned proudly. Lilith almost broke. 3 days. 3 days to find a mate, or lose him forever. And for the first time since becoming a widow, Lilith had absolutely no idea what she was going to do. The market buzzed with life the next morning. Merchants shouted. Children ran between stalls. The scent of fresh bread drifted through the air. Normally Lilith enjoyed coming here. Today she felt sick. 3 days had become 2. She had spent the entire night thinking, planning, panicking. None of it helped. Nobody wanted involvement in a legal dispute. Nobody wanted to challenge Garrick. Nobody wanted responsibility for a widow and her son, and certainly nobody wanted to pretend to be a maid. Then her eyes landed on a familiar vegetable stall. A quiet man stood behind it arranging carrots. Simple brown cloak, rough boots, rolled sleeves, calloused hands, dark shoulder-length hair partly hidden beneath his hood. Honeyed golden eyes. Reese. She had bought vegetables from him several times. Nothing more, nothing less. He was always polite, always quiet, always watching. Lilith stared, then looked away, then looked back. No, absolutely not. That was ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Then Jonan tugged her sleeve. Mama? Lilith looked down, then back at the stall, then at Jonan, then at the stall again. A terrible idea began forming. The kind of idea that ruined lives. The kind of idea desperate mothers made. And before she could talk herself out of it, she started walking toward the vegetable cellar. Chapter 2. The Vegetable Cellar. Lilith nearly turned around. Moon goddess. What was she doing? The idea had sounded desperate from across the market. Now that she stood in front of him, it sounded completely insane. The vegetable cellar waited. A few villagers moved past the stall. Someone nearby argued over the price of apples. A cart rolled across the stone road. Life continued. Yet somehow, Lilith felt as though every eye in the world was staring at her. Jonan tightened his grip on her hand. Mama? She squeezed his fingers gently. It's all right. It wasn't, not even close. The man behind the stall set down a basket of carrots. Unlike most merchants, he didn't immediately try to sell her something. Didn't smile, didn't make conversation. He simply waited, patiently, quietly, watching. It was strangely unnerving. Up close, she noticed details she had somehow missed before. His hands. No vegetable seller should have hands like that. The skin was rough and calloused, yes, but not from farming. The calluses sat in places that looked more suited to weapons. His shoulders were broad beneath the worn cloak. His posture was relaxed, yet somehow alert, like a wolf pretending to sleep. The thought came and went. Lilith pushed it away. She had bigger problems. The man finally spoke. Lady Lilith. His voice was deep, calm, smooth as dark honey. She blinked. You know my name? One corner of his mouth twitched. You come here every week. Oh, that made sense. Heat crept into her cheeks. Wonderful. She was already embarrassing herself, and suddenly pointed toward a pile of bright red apples. Mama, Lilith sighed. One moment, sweetheart. The little boy nodded obediently. The vegetable seller looked between them. His gaze softened slightly when it landed on Jonan. Not much, just enough for her to notice. And for some reason that made the next words easier. A little, can we talk? The man raised an eyebrow. We are talking. Lilith almost groaned. Right, of course, she lowered her voice. Privately. For the first time, genuine curiosity appeared in his eyes. The market continued bustling around them. The vegetable seller glanced toward a young man managing another stall nearby. The young man immediately frowned. No. The response came so quickly Lilith almost laughed. The younger man folded his arms. I already know that look. The vegetable seller ignored him. The younger man pointed a warning finger. Every time you get that look, trouble follows. Lilith blinked. The two clearly knew each other. The vegetable seller sighed. Watch the stall. The younger man looked horrified. Why? Because I asked. That isn't a reason. It is for me. The younger man muttered something under his breath. The vegetable seller finally turned back toward Lilith. Come. A few minutes later, they stood behind the market near a quiet storage building. Jonan sat nearby on a wooden crate, happily making his carved horse gallop across the ground. The little boy was close enough for Lilith to see him, far enough not to hear. The vegetable seller leaned against the wall, waiting. Lilith suddenly forgot every word she planned to say. This was a disaster, an absolute disaster. Maybe she should leave. Maybe she should pretend this never happened. Maybe Lady Lilith. His voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. You wanted to speak, right? She swallowed, then immediately wished she hadn't. Her throat felt dry. I need help. The man nodded. That was all. No questions. No judgment. Just a nod. For some that made it harder. I know this sounds strange. Still nothing. The silence practically begged her to continue. She closed her eyes briefly, then forced the words out. I need a mate. The world stopped. A chicken squawked somewhere nearby. A cartwheel creaked. Jonan made horse noises. The vegetable seller stared. Lilith wanted the earth to swallow her whole, immediately, without delay. Several seconds passed, then he spoke. You need a what? Definitely a mistake. Definitely, she should run, move packs. Change her name, live in the mountains, anything. Instead, she repeated herself. A mate. The man blinked, once, twice, then looked around as if checking whether someone else was standing behind him. There wasn't. Unfortunately. You do realize we've spoken approximately 6 times. Lilith covered her face. Moon goddess. I know, and most of those conversations involved potatoes. She groaned. The vegetable seller rubbed a hand over his beard, clearly trying to determine whether she was serious or insane, possibly both. When she finally lowered her hands, he was still staring. Let me understand this. His voice remained remarkably calm. You came to buy vegetables. Yes, you left. Yes, you returned. Yes. And now you're asking me to become your mate. When he said it like that, it sounded even worse. Lilith nodded weakly. The man looked skyward, as though searching for answers. Finding none, he looked back down. Why? The single word hit harder than she expected. Not because it was complicated, because it wasn't. It was simple. Honest, why? The market noises faded, the laughter, the shouting, the merchants, everything. Her gaze drifted toward Jonan. The little boy sat cross-legged on the ground, completely absorbed in his wooden horse, completely trusting, completely unaware that his future hung by a thread. Her chest tightened painfully. The vegetable seller followed her gaze. His expression changed slightly. Not much, just enough. Why? He asked again. This time she answered, because she couldn't carry it alone anymore. My husband died. The words came quietly. The vegetable seller didn't interrupt. He died in battle. Her fingers twisted together. 2 days after I gave birth. A flicker crossed his eyes. Something unreadable. She kept going. Because now that she had started, she couldn't stop. The warriors brought the news themselves. Her voice shook. I kept waiting for him anyway. A bitter laugh escaped every day. Her eyes burned. I kept thinking maybe they were wrong. The vegetable seller remained silent, listening. Actually listening. Not pretending. Not waiting for his turn to speak. Listening. Lilith stared at the ground. My son never met his father. The words hurt, even now, especially now. He doesn't remember him. Her voice broke. He never got the chance. The vegetable seller looked toward Jonan again. The little boy had somehow convinced himself the wooden horse could fly. It currently soared through the air, making very dramatic noises. The sight almost made her smile. Almost. Then reality returned. My uncle wants custody. The words fell between them, heavy, ugly, real. The vegetable seller's eyes sharpened. Lilith noticed immediately. He wants the inheritance. She laughed bitterly. He says he's protecting Jonan. The lie tasted foul. He doesn't care about Jonan. The vegetable seller said nothing. She appreciated that more than he knew. The court agrees with him. A tear slipped free. She wiped it away angrily. They said because I have no mate, I can't protect my own son. Silence, then what happened? Lilith laughed. The sound cracked. I panicked. The vegetable seller almost smiled. Almost. What did you do? She closed her eyes. I lied. That tiny almost smile finally appeared. What kind of lie? She pointed at him. The smile vanished. Understanding dawned. Slowly, very slowly. Then his eyes widened. You, Lilith nodded miserably. You told the court you had a mate. She nodded again. And now you're looking for one. Another nod. And somehow that led you to me. Yes. The vegetable seller stared at her, then laughed. Actually laughed. The deep sound caught her completely off guard. For a moment he looked younger, warmer, less mysterious. Then the laughter faded. His gaze returned to Jonan. The little boy had fallen off the crate and was currently dusting himself off with great dignity. Something shifted in the man's expression. A softness, a thought, a decision forming. Lilith saw it and held her breath. Because suddenly this didn't feel impossible anymore. The vegetable seller looked at her, really looked. At the tiredness beneath her eyes, the faded dress, the fear she was trying desperately to hide. Then at Jonan, again and again. The little boy finally looked over and waved. The vegetable seller surprised both of them by waving back. Jonan beamed, then returned to his horse. Silence settled between them, long, thoughtful, dangerous. Finally, what exactly would this arrangement involve? Hope exploded inside Lilith. She nearly cried right there. Instead, she answered quickly, A few weeks. The vegetable seller listened. I'll provide for you. One eyebrow rose. She rushed onward. Food, a room if needed, whatever you need. The eyebrow climbed higher. Lilith stopped talking. The vegetable seller looked completely unimpressed by the offer, which was strange. Most people would have jumped at it. Instead, he seemed interested in something else entirely. At last he sighed, then looked toward Jonan one final time. The little boy was now making the horse gallop up a wall, an impressive achievement. The vegetable seller shook his head. A small smile touched his lips. Then he looked back at Lilith. All right, the words barely registered. Lilith blinked. What? I'll do it. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. You will? Yes. Shock flooded her, pure shock, because she had spent all morning preparing arguments, begging, pleading. She hadn't prepared for success. Why? Now it was her turn to ask. The vegetable seller's gaze drifted to Jonan. The answer lingered there. For just a second. Then he looked back at her. Because a child shouldn't lose his family to greed. Something tightened painfully in Lilith's chest. Before she could respond, he pushed away from the wall. When is court? In 2 days. He nodded. Then we'd better convince them. And for the first time since the hearing, for the first time since she shouted in that courtroom, for the first since she lied, Lilith felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. Chapter 3. Hope was a dangerous thing. Lilith realized that the moment she left the market with Jonan's hand in hers, and the vegetable seller walking beside them, the afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the road. For the first time in days, her chest didn't feel like it was collapsing. The feeling frightened her, because hope meant she could still lose. Jonan skipped ahead happily, completely unaware that his future had changed within the span of a single conversation. The little boy's wooden horse bounced against his leg as he walked. Every few steps, he looked back to make sure the vegetable seller was still there. And every time he found him, he smiled. Lilith noticed. So did the vegetable seller. Neither mentioned it. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, until Lilith suddenly realized something. She stopped. The vegetable seller took another step before noticing. What? She stared. You agreed to become my mate temporarily. Yes, he waited. Lilith folded her arms. I don't even know your name. For the first time since agreeing, genuine amusement appeared in his eyes. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. Fair point. Jonan immediately perked up. The little boy loved learning names. What is it? The vegetable seller looked down at him. Riss, and repeated it instantly. Riss! The man's smile widened slightly. Close enough, Lilith found herself smiling too. Reese, simple, easy to remember, a good name. She had no idea how important it would become. The next morning began with panic. Again, Lilith was beginning to suspect panic had become a permanent part of her life. The local priest sat across from her dining table. A witness, a legal requirement, a headache. The elderly man adjusted his spectacles and looked between them. Lilith sat upright. Reese sat beside her. Jonan sat in the middle eating berries. The priest cleared his throat. So, nobody answered. The priest sighed. How long have you two known each other? Lilith almost choked. Ras calmly reached for a cup of water. The priest narrowed his eyes. I'll take that as not very long. Jonan proudly held up a berry. Reese helped me catch a chicken. The priest blinked. Lilith blinked. Reese blinked. Nobody remembered that happening. Jonan seemed extremely confident that it had. The priest rubbed his forehead. This may be the strangest mating interview I've ever conducted. Lilith wanted to disappear. Instead, she sat there while the priest asked questions. Questions she had no idea how to answer. Questions Reese somehow answered without sounding nervous. Questions that made the entire arrangement feel increasingly absurd. Finally, after what felt like hours, the priest leaned back. His gaze lingered on Jonan, then on Lilith, then on Reese. Something softened in his expression. Perhaps he saw what Reese had seen. A frightened mother. A little boy. A situation that wasn't fair. The priest sighed. Very well. Lilith straightened. The old man stood. Let's get this over with. The ceremony itself was simple. Small, private. No flowers, no celebration, no guests. Just a priest, a widow, a vegetable seller, and a little boy trying to feed berries to his wooden horse. The priest recited the traditional vows. Lilith repeated them. Reese repeated them. The words felt strange, like borrowing somebody else's life. Then came the symbolic binding. A silver ribbon wrapped loosely around their joined wrists. The priest spoke the final blessing. The moon goddess, the sacred bond, the responsibilities of mates, the protection owed to family. When the ceremony ended, the priest handed them the official record. The document looked far more real than the arrangement itself. Lilith stared at it, then at Rhys, then at the document again. Moon goddess. She had actually done it. The next morning arrived far too quickly. Lilith barely slept. The court hearing sat like a stone in her stomach. One wrong answer, one mistake, one suspicious elder, and everything would collapse. The house felt unusually quiet as she prepared breakfast. Sunlight spilled through the windows. Jonan sat at the table, kicking his feet. The little boy hummed happily while pushing his wooden horse through spilled flour. Lilith was cleaning the mess when a knock sounded at the door. Her heart immediately jumped. Rhys. She hurried to open it, then blinked. The man standing outside looked different. A dark hood covered much of his face. Shadows hid his features. Only part of his beard and jaw remained visible. Lilith frowned. What happened to you? Rhys stepped inside. Allergy, she stared. Allergy, yes. What kind of allergy? His expression remained perfectly serious. The unpleasant kind. Lilith folded her arms. Rhys, it's swelling. She narrowed her eyes. Rhys calmly removed his cloak. My face is swollen. Lilith wasn't convinced, not even a little. But there were bigger things to worry about, such as the fact they were about to stand before the court and defend the biggest lie she'd ever told. Jonan looked up from the table. Rise, Jonan, the little boy grinned. Rhys nodded once. Apparently that counted as a complete conversation between them. Lilith almost laughed. The courthouse felt colder than before. The same stone walls, the same wooden benches, the same elders, the same uncle. Only this time Lilith wasn't alone. Rhys stood beside her quiet, still hood lowered over his face. Across the room, Garrick's smug confidence vanished slightly. His eyes narrowed. Clearly he hadn't expected her to actually produce a mate. Good. The sight alone made the last few days worthwhile. The center elder adjusted his robes. You returned. Lilith nodded. Yes. The elder's gaze shifted toward Rhys. And this is your mate? Yes. Rhys remained silent. The elder studied him. One of the other elders frowned. Why is his face hidden? Lilith opened her mouth. Rhys spoke first. Allergy. The elder blinked. Excuse me? My face is swollen. Silence. A few people coughed. One guard looked away suspiciously fast. Even Garrick seemed confused. The elder pinched the bridge of his nose. Swollen, yes. The elder looked exhausted already. Lilith silently thanked the moon goddess that Rhys sounded confident, because she certainly didn't. The questioning continued. How long had they known each other? Were they officially mated? Could the priest verify the ceremony? The answers came smoothly. The priest himself stepped forward, confirmed everything, presented the documents, verified the ritual. One by one, the elders reviewed the records. Yet doubt still lingered. Lilith could feel it. Then Garrick stepped forward. Something feels wrong. Of course it did. The man could smell victory slipping away. This appeared far too suddenly. The elders exchanged glances. Lilith's stomach tightened. No, not again. Please, not again. The center elder slowly looked toward Rhys. For the first time, genuine scrutiny entered his eyes. The kind that made ordinary people nervous. The kind designed to expose lies. Young man. Rhys met his gaze. The room quieted. Do you fully understand what you're accepting? The elder's voice carried across the chamber. You would be responsible for Lady Lilith and her son. Rhys remained silent. The elder continued. You would stand as protector. Silence. You would be responsible for safeguarding the inheritance. The room waited. Then Rhys slowly lifted his head and locked onto the elder. The temperature in the room seemed to change. Lilith felt it immediately. So did everyone else. Something ancient, something powerful, something that had absolutely no business coming from a humble vegetable seller. The elder froze, not visibly, enough for others to notice. Lilith noticed. The old wolf's shoulders stiffened, his breath caught. Rhys said only 3 words. I understand completely. The elder looked into those golden eyes, then immediately looked away. A strange silence followed, the kind before storms. Finally, the elder cleared his throat. Loudly, very loudly. As all requirements have been met, Garrick straightened. The petition is denied. The room erupted. Some people gasped. Others whispered. Garrick looked like he'd been struck across the face. Lilith stopped breathing. Denied. The word echoed through her mind. Denied, denied. Her sons was staying with her. Her house was hers. The estate remained protected. Jonan remained hers. The elder struck his staff against the floor. The court recognizes the mating. Garrick's face turned a fascinating shade of red. Lilith wanted to frame the moment. The man opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. For once in his life, he had nothing to say. Lilith almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she looked at Rhys. The vegetable seller stood exactly where he'd been standing before. Calm, quiet, unbothered. As if he hadn't just stared down one of the most respected elders in the territory. As if nothing unusual had happened at all. The elder quickly moved to the next case. Very quickly. Almost suspiciously quickly. Lilith noticed. So did Garrick. Neither understood why. Only Rhys knew. And far away from the courtroom, hidden within the palace walls, a certain beta would have laughed himself sick if he'd witnessed the scene. Chapter 4. The first week after the court ruling felt strange. Not bad. Just strange. Lilith would wake every morning expecting disaster. A letter. A summons. Another challenge from Garrick. Something. Instead, life continued. The sun still rose. The chickens still escaped their pen. Jonan still woke far too early. And Rhys still sold vegetables. The realization felt oddly comforting. Because, despite everything that had happened, Rhys didn't suddenly move into her home. He didn't start acting like her husband. He didn't hover. He didn't interfere. In fact, the morning after court, he simply returned to his stall. As though pretending to be someone's mate before an entire court was a perfectly normal part of life. Lilith remembered standing in the market with a basket of potatoes when she first saw him afterward. He was arranging cabbages, the same as always. The same brown cloak, the same rolled sleeves, the same quiet expression. If she hadn't lived through the last few days herself, she might have believed none of it happened. Then Rhys looked up. Their eyes met. He gave a single nod and returned to his work. That was it. No dramatic conversation, no awkwardness. No expectations, just a nod. For some reason, Lilith appreciated that a lot. The arrangement settled into an unexpected rhythm. When people were watching, Rhys played his role. When they weren't, he returned to his own life. Simple, respectful, safe. At least that's how it began. 3 weeks later, Rhys was repairing a fence outside her property when Jonan decided the world contained no greater mystery. Why are you fixing it? Rhys hammered another nail. Because it's broken, Jonan considered this. Then nodded. Reasonable. 5 seconds passed. Why is it broken? The wood rotted. Another nod. 5 more seconds. Why? Lilith nearly laughed from the porch. Rhys glanced toward her. For the first time, she saw genuine desperation in his eyes, the kind warriors probably felt during battle. Unfortunately for him, there was no escape. Jonan had chosen his victim. An hour later, the little boy was sitting on Rhys's shoulders. The fence remained unfinished. The interrogation continued. Lilith watched from the garden. A smile tugged at her lips before she realized it. The sight felt warm, dangerously warm. She quickly returned to her work. Unfortunately, Garrick had not accepted defeat. The man possessed all the grace of a rabid wolf. Every few days, another rumor appeared. Lilith heard them everywhere. At the bakery, the market, the well. Somebody always had something to say. The vegetable seller isn't really her mate. The court was fooled. The ceremony wasn't legitimate. The widow trapped him somehow. The inheritance should have gone elsewhere. People loved gossip. It spread faster than wildfire. Lilith tried ignoring it. Most days she succeeded. Most days. Not all. One afternoon she returned from town carrying bread when she heard familiar laughter. 3 men stood near the road. Garrick among them. Just wonderful. Lilith immediately changed direction. Too late, Garrick spotted her. His smile widened. Dear niece. She kept walking. How is your vegetable seller? Lilith stopped. Not because she wanted to. Because anger had suddenly seized her by the throat. Slowly she turned. Garrick looked pleased. Very pleased. As useful as expected. The other men laughed. Lilith stared, then smiled. The reaction visibly confused him. Actually, she said sweetly, he's wonderful. The laughter stopped. Garrick blinked. Lilith continued. He fixes fences. Silence. He helps around the property. More silence. He even taught Jonan how to whistle. The smile slowly slid from Garrick's face. Lilith's own smile widened. And best of all, she stepped closer. He isn't you. Then she walked away. The explosion behind her was magnificent. The next day she found Riss in the market storage room, entirely by accident. She had come looking for sacks of grain, recently delivered from a neighboring settlement. Instead, she stopped at the doorway and froze. Reese stood inside, not alone. The younger man from the neighboring stall stood beside him. The same one who always argued with him. The same one who somehow ignored Reese's intimidating silence and spoke anyway. Today, neither man was arguing. Both looked serious, very serious. Reese held an unfolded scroll, a large one, not the sort merchants usually carried. Symbols decorated the edges. Official seals gleamed against the parchment. The younger man pointed toward something written near the bottom. Reese frowned. The atmosphere felt different. Sharp, focused, important. Not at all like two market workers discussing vegetables. Lilith immediately stepped back. Her first instinct was curiosity. Her second was caution, because whatever that scroll contained, it clearly wasn't her business. She knew very little about Rice. When she really thought about it, the realization surprised her. She knew he was patient, quiet, kind to Jonan, reliable, but she knew almost nothing else. Where he came from, who his family was, why he arrived in town, why he occasionally disappeared for days, why his friend constantly acted as though he was responsible for preventing disasters. Those answers belonged to Reese, and if he wanted her to know, he would tell her. So she quietly turned around and left, without making a sound. Inside the storage room, Reese suddenly lifted his head. Golden eyes narrowed slightly. The younger man noticed. What? Reese stared toward the doorway. Nothing stood there now, just empty air. A moment later, he returned to the scroll. Nothing. The younger man snorted. That's usually a lie. Reese ignored him. That evening, rain tapped gently against the windows. Jonan slept curled beneath blankets, his wooden horse tucked safely against his chest. Lilith sat near the fire sewing a torn shirt. The house felt peaceful, comfortable. Then a knock sounded. 3 taps. She smiled before realizing it. Only one person knocked like that. Reese stepped inside moments later. Rain glistened across his cloak. A basket hung from one arm. Lilith raised an eyebrow. What is that? Reese set it on the table. Food. She looked inside. Fresh vegetables, bread, apples, enough for several days. Lilith stared. Reese. He removed his cloak. No. The answer came instantly. Lilith frowned. No? No. She folded her arms. That's not how accepting gratitude works. Reese looked genuinely confused. I wasn't aware there were rules. For some reason, she laughed, actually laughed. The sound surprised both of them. Reese blinked, then smiled slightly, a small smile, brief, gone almost immediately. Yet somehow it changed his entire face. Lilith looked away first, and missed the way Reese's gaze lingered a second longer than necessary. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant hills. Inside, neither noticed the shift happening between them. The slow, dangerous shift that comes when strangers stop feeling like strangers. Neither noticed, but Jonan would. Children always did. And in the weeks to come, that little boy would begin asking questions and neither of them were ready to answer. Chapter 5. Summer arrived quietly. The wheat fields surrounding Lilith's property swayed beneath golden sunlight. Wildflowers bloomed along the roads. The air smelled of warm earth and fresh bread. Life felt peaceful. A dangerous thing, because peace had a way of making people forget how quickly life could change. Lilith learned that every morning when she woke and found herself smiling, it happened before she could stop it, before grief could catch her, before responsibility settled onto her shoulders. For a few precious moments, life felt lighter. Then she would hear footsteps outside, a familiar knock, 3 taps, and somehow the smile would stay. Reese had never officially moved in, at least, not according to either of them. It simply happened, gradually, naturally, without discussion. One evening he stayed late helping repair a leaking roof. A storm arrived. The roads became dangerous. He slept in the spare room. The next week he stayed after supper, because Jonan wanted to show him a collection of oddly shaped rocks. The week after that he helped bring in supplies. Then another storm came. Then another late evening. Then another. Until one day, Lilith realized half of Reese's belongings occupied the spare room. The realization startled her, because somehow it felt completely normal, as though he'd always been there. Jonan certainly thought so. The little boy had become Reese's shadow. Where one went, the other followed. If Reese repaired fences, Jonan helped, mostly by handing him the wrong tools. If Reese worked in the garden, Jonan dug random holes. If Reese visited the market, Jonan insisted on accompanying him. The two had developed their own strange language, one largely involving nodding. Lilith still didn't understand it. One morning she found them sitting together beneath a tree, neither speaking, just carving wood. Jonan looked delighted. Riss looked peaceful. Neither appeared bothered by the silence. Lilith stood watching from the kitchen window. Something warm settled inside her chest. Something frightening, because she could no longer imagine the house without him. And that realization terrified her. The market discovered it first. People always notice things, especially old women. Old women noticed everything. One afternoon, Lilith was buying flour when she heard two merchants whispering nearby. "Look at them." She glanced up. Reese stood several stalls away. Jonan sat proudly on his shoulders. The little boy pointed excitedly towards something. Reese listened as though it were the most important conversation in the world. The women sighed. Lilith immediately looked away. Unfortunately, not before hearing, "That's a good father." The words hit harder than expected. A father, not a mate. Not a husband. A father. Lilith spent the rest of the day pretending the sentence hadn't affected her. She failed miserably. A week later, Jonan returned from the market, unusually quiet. The little boy sat at the dinner table, swinging his feet, thinking, dangerous, very dangerous. Thinking usually led to questions, and questions often led to headaches. Lilith quickly noticed. "What is it?" Jonan poked his food, then looked toward Riss, then back at her, then toward Riss again. Lilith already disliked where this was heading. Finally, "Mama, yes, what's a daddy?" The spoon slipped from her fingers. Across the table, Riss froze. Completely froze. Jonan blinked, unaware he had just detonated a bomb. Lilith slowly recovered. "Where did you hear that?" "The market, of course." "The market, the source of 90% of all trouble." Jonan continued happily. "One boy said his daddy bought him a puppy." Lilith nodded carefully. "I see." The little boy thought for a moment, then smiled, a bright, innocent smile, the kind that broke hearts. "Reese feels like a daddy." Silence, absolute silence. Lilith couldn't breathe. Across the table, Riss looked equally stunned. Jonan continued eating, completely unaware of the devastation he'd caused. A few moments later, he looked up again. "Do I have a daddy?" Lilith's heart shattered. Again, the same wound. Every time. Always the same. Because the answer should have been easy. His father had loved him. His father had wanted him. His father had simply never gotten the chance. Lilith swallowed, hard. "Yes," Jonan brightened. "Really? Really?" The little boy smiled, then asked the question she dreaded most. "Where is he?" Lilith stared into her plate, searching for strength, finding none. Finally, she forced a smile. "Far away." Jonan nodded, accepting it immediately. Children trusted so easily. Then he pointed toward Riss. "Like Reese sometimes?" Lilith nearly broke. Reese quietly looked away, giving her privacy, giving her dignity, giving her time. The gesture somehow made everything worse. That night, Lilith cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Alone after Jonan slept, after the candles dimmed, after the world became silent. She sat beside the window and cried for the mate she'd lost, for the son who never met his father, for herself. Because sometimes strength was exhausting. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. 3 taps. Reese, of course. She opened the door. Moonlight painted silver across the yard. Reese stood outside. Neither spoke immediately. "Then is he asleep?" She nodded. Reese hesitated. Something troubled him. She could see it. The realization surprised her. Reese has always seemed so steady, so controlled. Yet tonight something weighed heavily on him. "What's wrong?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Reese looked toward the distant hills. The answer took a long time. Finally, "My work is ending," Lilith frowned. "What work?" For a moment she thought he might answer. Instead he shook his head. "Nothing important, a lie. An obvious one." Lilith recognized it immediately, but she remembered the scroll. The storage room, the secrets. So she didn't push. Reese seemed grateful. The following weeks passed too quickly, too quietly, too perfectly. The kind of happiness that makes people nervous. The kind that feels temporary. Reese spent more time away. Not enough for concern, just enough to notice. Sometimes he disappeared for days, then returned, tired, thoughtful, distracted. Lilith wanted to ask questions. She didn't, because everyone deserved private battles, even Reese, especially Riss. One evening, she caught him standing alone outside, watching the stars. The expression on his face looked almost sad. Lilith nearly walked over, nearly asked what troubled him. Instead, she remained inside, watching through the window. Something was ending, she could feel it. She just didn't know what. The answer came sooner than expected. The dinner had been lovely, simple, bread, stew, laughter. Jonan spent 20 minutes explaining why chickens were secretly plotting against everyone. Reese listened with suspicious seriousness. Even Lilith laughed. For a few precious hours, everything felt perfect. Then Jonan finally fell asleep. The candles burned low, silence settled, and Riss spoke. "I have to leave." The words landed heavily. Lilith blinked. "What?" Riss stared into his cup. "My work is finished." The room suddenly felt colder. "Finished?" "Yes." Lilith's chest tightened. An awful feeling began spreading through her. Slowly, relentlessly. She hated it immediately. "Where are you going?" "Not far." His voice remained gentle. "Careful. Too careful. I'll visit." The feeling worsened. "All right." Lilith looked away, because suddenly her eyes burned, and she didn't understand why. Reese continued. "There's a family matter that needs my attention." She nodded, slowly, mechanically, trying to be reasonable, trying to be mature, trying very hard not to ask him to stay. Because what right did she have? None, absolutely none. The arrangement wasn't real. The thought hurt far more than it should have. Across the room, a small voice suddenly spoke. "Daddy?" Both adults froze. Jonan stood in the doorway, sleepy, disheveled, barefoot. The little boy rubbed his eyes. Apparently he'd heard enough. Reese stared. Lilith stared. Jonan looked confused, then worried. "You're leaving?" Nobody answered. The little boy's lip trembled, just slightly. Enough to break hearts. Reese stood immediately, crossing the room, kneeling before him. "I'll come back." Jonan blinked rapidly. "Promise?" "I promise." The little boy launched himself forward, wrapping both arms around Reese's neck. Reese held him tightly, very tightly, as though memorizing the moment. Lilith looked away, unable to watch, unable not to. Eventually, Rice carried him back to bed, tucked him in, returned. Neither adult slept much that night. Morning arrived cruelly fast. The carriage waited outside, supplies packed, the road stretching endlessly beyond the gate. Lilith stood beside the door holding a basket. Food, fresh bread, fruit, the usual things people gave travelers. The things that said, "Come back safely." Reese accepted it. Their fingers brushed. Neither mentioned it. The silence felt heavier than words. Finally, Reese stepped away, toward the road, toward whatever life waited beyond it. Lilith forced a smile. "You should go." Rias nodded, yet neither moved. Then a door slammed open. Tiny footsteps thundered through the house. Both turned. Jonan burst outside, hair wild, eyes wide. Still wearing his night clothes, he looked as though he'd only just woken. The little boy ran across the yard as fast as his legs could carry him, straight toward Reese. "Daddy, wait!" The cry echoed through the morning air. And for the first time since deciding to leave, Rydian Vale almost changed his mind. Chapter 6. The yard felt empty after Reese left, painfully empty. Lilith noticed it immediately. The spare room sat untouched. His favorite chair near the fireplace remained exactly where he'd left it. Even the mornings felt quieter, as though the house itself missed him. For Jonan, the change was worse, much worse. The little boy spent the first week asking questions. Every morning, every afternoon, every evening. "Mama? Yes, sweetheart, when is Reese coming back?" Lilith always smiled, always, even when it hurt. "Soon." Jonan accepted the answer each time, because children believed the people they loved. The realization hurt more than she cared to admit. The first letter arrived 12 days later. A courier knocked shortly after sunrise. Lilith nearly dropped the basket she was carrying. Nobody ever sent her letters. Nobody. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the envelope. The handwriting looked familiar, strong, neat, simple. Riss. The moment she recognized it, her heart jumped. Across the yard, Jonan noticed immediately. Letter. The little boy abandoned his wooden horse and sprinted toward her. Letter, Lilith laughed despite herself. Yes, from Reese? She looked at the seal, then smiled. From Riss. Jonan nearly exploded with excitement. They opened it together. The letter was short, simple. Reese had arrived safely. Work was keeping him busy. He hoped Jonan wasn't terrorizing the chickens. He hoped Lilith was remembering to rest. At the bottom sat a small drawing, a terrible drawing, an absolutely horrible drawing of a horse. Jonan stared at it, then burst into laughter. He can't draw, Lilith laughed too. No, he really can't. For the first time since Reese left, the house felt warm again. The letters continued. Not often, but enough, sometimes every 2 weeks, sometimes every month. Each one carried pieces of him, little details, small jokes, questions for Jonan, reminders for Lilith. The little boy treasured every single one. Eventually he began writing back, or trying to. His letters mostly consisted of crooked drawings and words spelled creatively. Very creatively. One letter informed Reese that the chicken declared war. Lilith still wasn't sure what that meant. Reese apparently understood. His reply included military strategies. The war against the chicken continued for weeks. Then the letters stopped. At first nobody worried. Reese was busy. Work happened. Life happened. Days passed. Then weeks. Then more weeks. Still nothing. Jonan noticed first. The little boy sat by the window one evening, watching the road, waiting. Lilith found him there after supper. What are you doing? Jonan pointed. Curious. Her heart tightened. No courier today. Oh. The disappointment in his voice nearly broke her. The next day he waited again, and the next and the next. Eventually the question arrived, the one she dreaded. Mama, yes? Where is Papa? The word hit her unexpectedly. Papa Nasris. Papa. Lilith swallowed. Hard. Far away. Jonan thought about it, then spread his tiny arms dramatically. Fur away? Despite everything, she smiled. Very far away. The little boy nodded seriously, as though this explained everything. A moment later, he looked up again. The silver blue eyes he'd inherited from her seemed too wise for his age. What about my papa? The smile vanished. Instantly, Lilith froze. The room became silent. Too silent. Jonan continued innocently. The first papa. Pain exploded through her chest. The old wound. The one that never truly healed. The father who never came home. The mate she'd loved. The man who never held his son. Lilith looked away quickly, searching for strength. Finding almost none. Finally she managed. He's with the moon goddess. Jonan blinked. Oh, silence then. Reese papa? The question shattered her completely. Because there was so much trust in it. So much hope. The little boy genuinely believed Reese belonged to them. Belonged with them. Lilith couldn't answer immediately. Her throat closed. Tears burned her eyes. Jonan waited patiently. Eventually she forced a smile. A weak one. Maybe. The little boy seemed satisfied. Lilith wasn't. That night she cried harder than she had in months. The kingdom changed shortly afterward. News arrived in waves. Whispers first, then rumors, then fear. Conflict had erupted near the border. The northern region and the eastern region stood on the edge of war. People gathered in markets, in taverns, at wells. Everyone had something to say. Nobody knew what was true. The uncertainty terrified them. Then the official notices appeared. The situation was serious. Movement should be limited. Travel should be reduced. Everyone should remain cautious. Fear settled over the territory, like a storm cloud, waiting, watching, growing. The war lasted 2 months. 2 long months. 2 terrible months. No letters arrived. No news from Reese. Nothing. Every day felt heavier. Every night felt longer. Lilith continued working. Continued smiling for Jonan. Continued pretending she wasn't worried. The little boy noticed anyway. Children always did. One evening, he climbed onto her lap, wrapped tiny arms around her neck, and whispered, Rice Papa is okay. Lilith almost cried right there. Instead, she hugged him tightly, very tightly. I hope so. Then one evening everything changed. The palace bells rang, huge, thunderous, victorious. The sound echoed across the territory. People poured from their homes, cheering, laughing, crying. The eastern region had won. The war was over. Relief swept through the community like wildfire. For the first time in months, people breathed again. Life slowly returned. Shops reopened. Roads grew busy. Markets filled with laughter. The nightmare ended, or so they hoped. A week later, another courier arrived, this time carrying far more than a letter. A large basket accompanied him, beautiful fruit, rare tea, fresh pastries, small carved toys, enough gifts to make Jonan nearly faint from excitement. Lilith stared, completely bewildered. Then she noticed the handwriting. Rhys, her heart leapt again. Faster than before, they opened the letter together. Jonan practically climbed into her lap. Lilith unfolded the parchment and began reading. Rhys apologized immediately. Work had overwhelmed him. Travel restrictions during the war made communication difficult. Reliable couriers had become almost impossible to find. He hadn't forgotten them, not for a moment. Lilith reread that line twice, then continued. Rhys explained he was now working at the Pack Palace. The position required him to remain there. He could not leave, not yet, but he wanted to see them very much. The final lines made Jonan bounce excitedly. Please visit. I miss you both. Lilith smiled despite herself. Jonan looked ready to explode. We go, the little boy practically shouted it. Lilith laughed. Maybe we go, Jonan, we go, Jonan, we go. The battle lasted 20 minutes. Lilith lost completely. 2 days later, a carriage rolled down the palace road. The morning sun painted the distant palace towers gold. Jonan pressed his face against the window. His excitement had become physically impossible to contain. Every few seconds. Are we there? No. 5 minutes later. Now no. Another 5 minutes. Now. Lilith laughed. No. The little boy sighed dramatically, as though she personally delayed the journey. Eventually the palace appeared fully, massive, beautiful, impossible. Jonan gasped. Lilith forgot to breathe, because suddenly everything felt real. They were going to see Rhys after 6 months, after war, after silence. After waiting, the carriage rolled forward, toward answers, toward surprises, toward a truth neither of them could possibly imagine. The throne room had finally emptied. For the first time all day, silence settled over the palace. Radian Vale leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Just for a moment, only a moment. The border war had ended weeks ago, yet the aftermath seemed endless. Trade routes needed rebuilding. Damaged villages required aid. Nobles wanted compensation. Merchants wanted protection. Generals wanted soldiers. Everyone wanted something. Everyone needed something. And somehow all of it eventually found its way to him. The Alpha King exhaled slowly. A sharp knock interrupted the rare peace. The door opened. Sean entered, carrying another stack of reports. Radian didn't even open his eyes. Leave them. Sean stared, then stared harder. You slept 2 hours. Silence. You have shadows beneath your eyes. More silence. You look terrible. Radian finally opened one eye. Sean pointed accusingly. If you collapse, I'm leaving. The Alpha King returned his attention to the documents. Sean dropped the reports onto the desk, with enough force to make several papers slide sideways. You disappeared for months pretending to sell vegetables, and somehow I'm the one suffering. Silence. Sean folded his arms. I want that officially recorded. A faint smile almost appeared on Radian's face. Almost. Sean immediately noticed. His eyes narrowed. Oh no, Radian continued reading. Oh no, the beta pointed dramatically. You're smiling again. I'm not, you are. I'm not, you absolutely are. Sean looked genuinely disturbed. Every time you smile lately, something is wrong. The Alpha King said nothing. Sean leaned forward, dangerously curious. Did the courier return? Radian's eyes lifted immediately. Sean groaned. There it is. The Alpha King sat straighter. Did he? Sean dragged both hands down his face. The kingdom is recovering from war. Sean, the eastern border still needs repairs. Sean, I have 3 generals waiting outside. Sean, the beta sighed dramatically. Yes. Radia became very still, a subtle change, tiny, almost invisible. Yet Sean noticed. Of course he noticed. The beta had known him for years. He'd seen him furious, victorious, broken, exhausted. But this was different. Sean watched as Radian reached for the letter, resting near the corner of his desk. The paper had already been unfolded several times. Far too many times. Sean squinted. You've read that thing at least 20 times. No 30? No 40. Radian ignored him. Sean threw both hands into the air. Moon Goddess, help me! A short while later, another visitor appeared. Unlike Sean, she didn't bother knocking. The door swung open. Sarah walked inside. The Alpha King's younger sister moved with effortless confidence. Her dark hair flowed down her back in elegant waves. A simple blue dress replaced the formal gowns she hated wearing. Her bright eyes immediately landed on her brother, then narrowed dangerously. Oh, Rydian didn't look up. Oh no, that tone. What? Sarah pointed. You're smiling across the room. Sean looked vindicated. Cease, I told you. Sarah ignored him. She marched toward the desk, then froze. A piece of paper sat near Rydian's hand. She picked it up, examined it, looked at it again. The drawing was terrible, absolutely terrible. A horse, possibly, maybe. The artist's intentions remained unclear. Sarah looked at the drawing, then at Rydian, then back at the drawing. Your artistic standards have dropped. The Alpha King immediately reached for it. Too late. Sarah held it higher. Suspicion bloomed across her face. It's a gift. The words slipped out before Rydian could stop them. Sarah slowly lowered the paper. Very slowly. A woman. No, a child. Silence. Sarah gasped dramatically, loud enough to alert nearby servants. A woman and a child. Sean immediately buried his face in his hands. Rydian closed his eyes. Regret arrived instantly. He should have said nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sarah practically vibrated with excitement. A child drew this. Silence. You kept it. More silence. You treasure it. Still silence. Sarah pointed triumphantly. You have a family. No, you do. No, you absolutely do. Sean looked up. She's right. Thank you. You're welcome. Rydian considered exiling both of them, briefly, very briefly. Several hours later, the mood inside the palace changed. The guards became quieter, the servants more alert. Word spread quickly. A special court session had been called. One man in particular had been summoned, Garrick, former pack steward, current nuisance, future disaster. The man entered the palace dressed in his finest clothes. His confidence returned the moment he stepped through the gates. Perhaps the Alpha wanted information, perhaps recognition, perhaps assistance. Whatever the reason, Garrick felt important enough to smile. That smile didn't last. The throne room doors opened, massive, heavy, ancient. Warriors lined the walls. Nobles filled the chamber. Elders occupied the front rows. The atmosphere alone made Garrick nervous. He swallowed. Hard. Then the royal herald struck his staff against the floor. Alpha King Rydian Vale. Every warrior dropped to one knee. Every noble bowed. Every elder lowered their head. And through the enormous doors walked a man Garrick knew. A man he had mocked, insulted, humiliated, dismissed. The vegetable seller. The world tilted. The air vanished from Garrick's lungs. No, no, no. The same dark hair. The same golden eyes. The same face. Only now there was no worn cloak, no stall, no vegetables. Black royal attire flowed around him. Silver embroidery gleamed across the fabric. The Alpha crest rested proudly against his chest. Power seemed to fill the room itself. Garrick's knees nearly gave out. Rydian ascended the throne, calm, unhurried, terrifying. Then he sat. Silence swallowed the chamber. Garrick could barely breathe. The Alpha King opened a document. Another, then another. Finally, you were warned. The words echoed across the room. Garrick dropped to his knees, immediately. Panic flooded his face. My Alpha. Rydian lifted a hand. The man fell silent, instantly. The Alpha King's voice remained calm, which somehow made everything worse. You attempted to weaponize pack law against a widow. Another document. You targeted a child. Another. You spread falsehoods concerning Lady Lilith. Garrick began shaking, visible shaking. Sweat gathered across his forehead. The nobles watched with open fascination. Nobody dared interrupt. Nobody. Rydian's golden eyes settled upon him, cold, disappointed, not angry. Disappointed. Garrick would have preferred anger, far preferred it. Your actions dishonor the office you were entrusted to uphold. The chamber remained silent. Then came the sentence, simple, merciless. From this day forward, your title is revoked. The words landed like an executioner's blade. Gone, everything. Years of status, influence, power, respect gone, just like that. Garrick's face drained of color. No, furthermore, the single word silenced him. Rydian rose. The throne room seemed to tighten around him. The Alpha King's aura rolled outward, heavy, ancient, unavoidable. Garrick nearly collapsed. You will have no contact with Lady Lilith. The man's breathing became ragged. You will have no contact with Jonan. The chamber remained deathly quiet. And if you approach either of them again, Rydian's voice dropped lower. dangerously low. You answer directly to me, not the guards, not the elders, not the court, the alpha. Garrick's remaining courage shattered completely. Two warriors stepped forward. Neither looked sympathetic. As they dragged him away, Garrick looked back once, only once. The Alpha King wasn't even watching him anymore. The audience was over, finished, meaningless, because Redian's attention had already shifted elsewhere, far away from politics, far away from titles, far away from punishment, toward a little boy with a wooden horse and a woman with silver blue eyes. Chapter 7. The palace was even bigger up close. Lilith had seen it from distant roads before, from market hills, from traveling carriages, from places where it looked almost unreal. But standing before it, that was different. The towering stone walls seemed to touch the clouds. Silver banners fluttered in the breeze. Royal guards stood watch near enormous gates. Everything looked polished, powerful, important. Beside her, Jonan practically vibrated with excitement. The little boy pressed himself against the carriage window. His nose nearly flattened. "Mama." "Yes, it's huge," Lilith laughed. "It is. I think Rhys lives in a castle." The innocent statement made her smile. "He works here now." Jonan nodded seriously. "Then he definitely lives in a castle." Apparently that settled the matter. The moment they arrived, palace servants greeted them warmly, far warmer than Lilith expected. A servant helped her from the carriage. Another greeted Jonan. A third immediately took charge of their bags. Lilith found it strange. She was nobody important, a widow from a small community. Yet everyone treated her as though she mattered. The thought followed her all the way into the palace. The waiting court was beautiful. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows. Marble floors gleamed beneath their feet. Elegant paintings decorated the walls. Jonan stared at everything. The little boy looked ready to explode from excitement. Lilith sat beside him, trying not to feel nervous, trying not to wonder why Rhys hadn't arrived yet. The letter had specifically asked them to visit. So where was he? A few minutes later, a woman entered the room and immediately caught Lilith's attention, not because of what she wore, though the simple regal blue dress certainly hinted at status, not because of her confidence, though she carried herself with effortless grace. No, it was her face. Lilith blinked, then blinked again. The resemblance was impossible to miss. The same dark hair, the same eyes, the same jawline. The woman looked like a softer version of Rhys, a female version. The woman smiled brightly. "Hello," Lilith rose politely. "Hello." The woman approached, friendly, warm, completely at ease. "My name is Sarah." Lilith introduced herself. Then, Jonan, the little boy, immediately held up his wooden horse, as if introductions weren't complete without it. Sarah accepted this with surprising seriousness. "What a magnificent horse!" Jonan grinned. Clearly she'd passed some invisible test. Lilith smiled. "We're actually here for Rhys." The reaction was immediate. Tiny, barely noticeable, but it was there. Sarah blinked. Oh, a smile appeared, then widened. "Rhydian?" Lilith frowned. The name sounded familiar somehow. Before she could place it, Sarah continued. "He's finishing a meeting." Lilith nodded politely. "That's all right." Sarah sat beside them, completely relaxed, completely unaware she was standing on the edge of a cliff. The conversation flowed easily, almost naturally. Lilith found herself liking her immediately. Sarah had a warmth about her, a kindness, the sort that made people comfortable. Eventually, curiosity got the better of Lilith. "Do you work here too?" Sarah laughed. The sound echoed softly through the room. "No." The answer came easily. "I just came to visit my brother." Lilith smiled. That made sense. The resemblances alone would have confirmed it. A few moments later, Sarah crouched before Jonan. The little boy looked delighted by the attention. "Would you like to see the stables?" His eyes widened. Immediately, the wooden horse nearly slipped from his hands. "The real horses?" "The real horses." Jonan looked at Lilith. "Permission. Always permission first." Her chest squeezed. "Such a good boy," she smiled. "You can go." The little boy practically launched himself forward. Sarah laughed, then stood, trying to make conversation while they waited, trying to be helpful, trying to be kind. And then, she accidentally destroyed everything. "Oh, Rhydian should be done soon." Lilith nodded. "Good." Sarah smiled. "The recent war created a mountain of work." Lilith listened politely. "He barely sleeps." A fond eye roll. "You know," Sarah laughed lightly. Alpha duties. The world stopped. Lilith froze. The smile vanished from her face. Completely. Her heart missed a beat, then another. Slowly, what? Sarah blinked. What? What alpha duties? The confusion on Sarah's face appeared instantly. In confusion, not deception. Not calculation, confusion. As though Lilith had suddenly started speaking another language. Sarah opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, then footsteps echoed from the corridor. Strong, measured, familiar. Every instinct inside Lilith screamed before she even turned. She knew those footsteps. Moon goddess. She knew them. The doorway darkened. A figure appeared, and everything inside her shattered. Yet not not really. Gone was the worn cloak. Gone were the rough boots. Gone were the rolled sleeves stained with dirt. Gone was the vegetable cellar. Black royal clothing fit him perfectly. Silver embroidery gleamed along the fabric. The alpha crest rested proudly upon his chest. Power rolled from him effortlessly. Not forced, not displayed. Simply there, like breathing, like sunlight, like gravity. The entire room seemed smaller around him. Lilith couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Rhys froze too. For one brief moment, his eyes landed on her, then on Sarah, and immediately understanding appeared. Moon goddess. He knew exactly what had happened. Before anyone could speak, a blur shot across the room. Jonan. The little boy ran straight toward him, laughing, smiling, happy, completely unaware of the devastation unfolding around him. Rhys. Rydian caught him effortlessly, lifting him into his arms, holding him close, ruffling his dark hair. The familiar gesture somehow hurt even more. Jonan laughed. The sound echoed through the room. Innocent, trusting, beautiful. Lilith wanted to cry. Sarah looked between them, then between Rydian and Lilith, then back again. And finally, the realization struck. Hard. Oh, the single word escaped her lips. Oh. Rydian closed his eyes briefly, as though bracing himself. Then he gently lowered Jonan. Why don't you go with Sarah? The little boy nodded immediately, because he trusted him. Without question, without hesitation, the thought hurt so much. Sarah quietly took Jonan's hand. For once, even she didn't know what to say. The two disappeared down the corridor, leaving silence behind. Heavy silence. Painful silence. Only Lilith and Rydian remained. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then finally, Lilith found her voice. It came out broken, small, almost unrecognizable. Who are you? The question landed like a blade. Rydian swallowed. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable, human, yet it changed nothing, because every memory suddenly felt different. Every smile, every conversation, every moment, all of it, a lie. Rydian took a slow breath, then answered. The exact words she would remember for the rest of her life. To you, his voice softened, pain filled it, real pain. Rhys, his golden eyes never left hers. Just Rhys. A pause then, but to them, the words echoed through the room. Alpha Rydian Vale. Lilith stared. The name hit harder than anything else. Not Rydian, not Alpha. Vale, the royal bloodline, the ruling family. The Alpha King, Moon Goddess. The Alpha King. The vegetable seller had never been a vegetable seller. The man who fixed fences. The man who carried Jonan on his shoulders. The man who shared simple dinners. The man who taught her son how to whistle. The man she'd trusted. The man she'd opened her home to. The man she'd almost, her heart cracked, cleanly, deeply. Rydian stepped closer. Lilith, no. The word came instantly, sharp, broken. She stepped back, his expression twisted, as though she'd physically struck him. For once she didn't care. Tears burned her eyes, hot, relentless. You lied. The accusation hung between them. Rydian looked devastated, actually devastated. Yet she couldn't stop. Couldn't. My son trusts you. The tears finally spilled. He loves you. Rydian flinched. He calls you Dad. Another flinch. He looks up to you. Her voice broke completely. And all this time, silence. Painful silence. You've been lying to our faces. The room became impossibly still. Rydian tried stepping closer again. She moved away immediately. The reaction hurt him. She saw it, ignored it. Because she was hurting too. Moon Goddess. She was hurting too. Rydian opened his mouth, trying to explain. Trying to fix it. Trying desperately to reach her. Lilith lifted a trembling hand, stopping him. Don't. His words died instantly. The sight almost broke her. Almost. Then she turned and walked away. Because if she stayed another second, she might forgive him, and she wasn't ready. Not yet. Not even close. She found Jonan in the palace gardens, playing with another little boy near a fountain. The two children chased each other between flower beds, laughing, happy, carefree. The sight almost destroyed her, because suddenly she realized how lonely he'd been, how desperately he'd attached himself to Rhys, how deeply he loved him. Sarah noticed her immediately. Concern filled her face. "Goddess," Lilith forced a smile. "A terrible one. I came to get Jonan." The little boy stopped running. Instant disappointment crossed his face. "Mama?" Sarah knelt beside him, gentle, kind, still completely unaware how much damage she'd accidentally caused. "He can stay if you'd like." Lilith looked at her son, really looked at him, the smile, the laughter, the happiness. The way he kept glancing around, hoping Rhys would appear. Her heart broke all over again. Sarah spoke softly. "Jonan will be well taken care of." Lilith closed her eyes just briefly, then nodded, slowly, painfully. 2 days. Sarah smiled. "Of course." Lilith crouched before her son. Jonan immediately hugged her. She held her tightly, memorizing the moment, because suddenly everything felt uncertain, everything. "I'll come back soon." The little boy nodded, satisfied, trusting, just like always. Then he ran back to his new friend, laughing, playing, living. Lilith watched for several seconds, then turned away because she couldn't bear it anymore. Not today, not after this. As she left the palace, she never looked back, not once. But behind one of the upper windows, Rydian stood completely still, watching the carriage disappear down the road. And for the first time in months, the strongest wolf in the kingdom felt utterly helpless. Chapter 8. The next day felt longer than the 6 months Rydian had been gone. Lilith woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, too quiet. Jonan wasn't there. His laughter wasn't echoing through the rooms. His wooden horse wasn't abandoned somewhere it shouldn't be. His little voice wasn't asking impossible questions. The silence hurt. Everything hurt. She tried cleaning. It didn't help. She tried baking. It didn't help. She tried working. That somehow made it worse, because every corner of the house reminded her of Rhys. Not Alpha Rydian Vale, not the ruler of the eastern region, Rhys, the man who fixed fences, the man who quietly brought vegetables when he thought nobody was looking, the man who sat through Jonan's endless stories, the man who somehow became part of their little family without either of them realizing it. A bitter laugh escaped her. Family, what a foolish thing to believe. A knock sounded. 3 taps. Lilith froze. Her heart betrayed her instantly, because she knew that knock. Moon goddess. She knew it. 3 taps, always 3. For one stupid moment, hope surged. Then reality returned. No, not hope. Not after yesterday. Slowly she walked toward the door, opened it, and stopped breathing. Jonan launched himself into her arms. "Mama!" The force nearly knocked her backward. She caught him immediately, holding him tightly, relief flooding her entire body. "Jonan!" The little boy laughed, wrapped himself around her neck, and only then did she see him, standing beyond her son. Rydian, no Rhys, no both. For the first time she truly understood that. He stood in simple dark clothing, not royal attire, not the vegetable seller's old clothes, something in between, as though he didn't know which version of himself she would accept. His golden eyes met hers, careful, hopeful, terrified. The sight nearly broke her again. Jonan happily pulled away, completely oblivious. Rhys came too. Of course he did. The little boy grabbed her hand, then Rydian's, trying to pull them both inside, like this was the most natural thing in the world. Lilith almost cried. Instead, she stepped aside. "I'm giving you just 20 minutes. Relief flashed across Rydian's face, small, brief, but there. 20 minutes. Jonan quickly disappeared toward his room, apparently determined to show Sarah's son every toy he owned during future visits. The moment he was gone, silence settled between them. Heavy, dangerous. Rydian stood near the table. Lilith remained by the fireplace. Distance, a deliberate distance. Finally, "You look beautiful." The words escaped before he could stop them. Lilith blinked, then looked down. A simple white dress, nothing special, nothing grand. Yet the way he looked at her made her feel as though she'd walked into a royal ball. The realization annoyed her. She crossed her arms. "You have 19 minutes left." A faint smile appeared, gone almost instantly. Rydian nodded. Then he told her everything. Not every detail, not every secret, but enough. The corruption, the investigation, The reason he went undercover, the danger, the lies, the responsibility, the war, the kingdom. All of it. Lilith listened quietly, sometimes angry, sometimes understanding, sometimes both. When he finished, silence returned. The fire crackled softly. Outside, birds sang. Inside, two stubborn wolves stared at each other. Finally, why? His brow furrowed. Why what? Why didn't you tell me? The question came out smaller than she'd intended, more hurt than anger. Rydian looked away. The answer took a while. Because it was dangerous. Lilith nodded. She'd expected that answer. Yet it still hurt, because danger didn't erase pain. It only explained it, nothing more. Rydian stepped closer. Not enough to crowd her, just enough. I never wanted to hurt you. The sincerity in his voice was unbearable, because she believed him. Moon Goddess help her. She believed him. I know. The words surprised them both. Rydian looked stunned. Lilith sighed, because she was tired of anger, tired of hurt, tired of pretending none of it mattered. She looked at him, really looked, the same man, exactly the same. The clothes were different, the title was different. Everything else remained, the kindness, the patience, the warmth, the way he looked at Jonan, the way he looked at her. None of that had changed, not once. Then Rydian asked the question he'd clearly been carrying for days. His voice softened. Are you separating from me? Lilith stared, then stared harder. The absurdity nearly made her laugh. Separating? Hope flickered in his eyes. Tiny, fragile. Lilith shook her head, slowly. You're the alpha of our territory. Rydian didn't react. She continued. It wasn't even real to begin with. The words hung in the air. Pain flashed across his face. Then, Rydian closed the distance, took her hand, and before she could stop him, pressed a gentle kiss against her knuckles. The warmth shot straight through her chest. His voice dropped low, raw, honest, dangerously honest. Every moment was real to me. Lilith stopped breathing. Rydian looked directly into her eyes. From the first days I saw you buying bread, her heart stumbled. To the first day you walked up to that stall. Another beat, to right now. The room felt smaller, warmer, too warm. She pulled her hand back, not because she wanted to, because she needed to think, needed to breathe, needed, what about your mate? The question escaped immediately, because he was an alpha king, a ruler. Surely someone existed, surely. Rydian smiled sadly. No, Lilith frowned. No? The seers told my family years ago. His voice remained calm. I don't have a destined mate. Silence. The words settled between them. Then he stepped closer again, close enough now that she could see every detail of his face, every scar, every emotion, every vulnerability. And suddenly the Alpha King disappeared, leaving only Riss, the man she'd fallen in love with without realizing it. His voice broke slightly, just slightly. Enough. Lilith. The way he said her name almost undid her. Then came the words she would remember forever. Don't kick me out. Her breath caught. Rydian laughed weakly, a wounded sound. You and Jonan, his eyes glistened. You're my little family. The room went silent, completely silent, because some truths carried too much weight for immediate answers. Lilith looked away first, toward the kitchen, toward the table, toward anywhere except him, because if she looked too long, she might cry. Then she thought about Jonan, the way he waited for letters, the way he asked for Riss. The way he ran across the yard shouting, Daddy, wait, Moon Goddess. The little boy had chosen him long before either adult understood what was happening. A laugh escaped her suddenly, soft, unexpected. Rydian blinked, confused, then she shook her head. You're impossible. Hope exploded across his face. Lilith pointed a warning finger. Don't look at me like that. I haven't forgiven you. I know. Not even close, I know. You lied, I know. Lilith narrowed her eyes. Rydian looked suspiciously pleased considering the circumstances. Then she sighed, long, slow, exhausted. And finally, let's eat dinner first. For 1 second, Rydian simply stared. Then relief crashed over him. Massive, visible, real. The strongest wolf in the kingdom looked as though he'd survived a battle. Lilith rolled her eyes. Honestly, men, even alpha kings. That evening the house felt warm again, whole again. Jonan sat between them at dinner, talking endlessly, laughing endlessly, living endlessly. At one point he looked between them, then smiled, a huge smile, the kind only children could manage. What? Lilith asked. Jonan happily shoveled food into his mouth, then pointed, then at Rydian. Papa, the spoon slipped from Lilith's hand. Across the table, Redian froze. Jonan grinned, completely satisfied, as though he'd finally solved a puzzle. Everyone else struggled to understand. Maybe he had, because some things children saw long before adults did. Outside, the sun slowly disappeared beyond the hills. Inside, laughter filled the little house. And for the first time in a very long time, nobody felt alone. Not the widow, not the Alpha King, and certainly not the little boy with the wooden horse. The family that began with a desperate lie had somehow become real.